Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Simon Orrells from Frame Technologies, timber frame company. Today we're going to talk about Martin and Sarah's live self-build project. Martin, Sarah will be with us tomorrow. This was a very interesting project built in Oxfordshire back in, ironically, 12 months to now the journey started. Martin, looking for a site, like everybody else these days, struggle to turn around and find a building plot. So, as a lot of plots come available these days, it's usually find a building with a house on it, and remove that because obviously all the services and everything are on site. The only thing being that when you look at that house on the left, you think to yourself, well, actually, it just looks a bit too good to knock down and actually take it forward. But the guy that was selling it turned around and did it up, obviously to sell, and basically over the 6-month period, Martin took it to the picture on the left. So he went from a bungalow of about 140 square metres, 130 square metres to 260 square metres. And as we go through the build, you'll see not only how he's maximised the space, but also the sort of trials and tribulations he's had during that journey, which a lot of you will appreciate. So they bought the plot back in August 2016. They got planning was relatively straightforward.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Like I said to somebody earlier on, I actually work in the council where we applied for planning. So we had to go through full planning committee, which actually took a bit longer, but it was pretty straightforward, and yeah, they were fine with it really.
So it got you underway, and obviously why are we here today? That one of the big key milestones in Martin's journey was obviously coming to the centre 12 months to now. But you were saying earlier you came to the show in the summer last year.
Yeah.
And then obviously he got the plot. It's like anything else, you know yourself. You can come to these shows, but until you've actually got the plot and you've got planning, you can look at all the different system providers and all the different services you want to use, but you need the project to actually get underway. So obviously Martin and Sarah came to the show this time last year with a vision. Then obviously by then you decided what build system you were going to use.
Yeah, I mean, due to the sort of speed of it and the price and everything, we pretty much decided we were going to go for a timber frame. Like Simon said, the reason I've come back today is basically, you know, last year I was in the opposition where I didn't really know what I was doing, never built a house before in my life. Yeah, so just trying to sort of pass on a bit of knowledge and stuff to you guys really.
Because I think it's surprising what you sort of picked up from the centre, and to a certain extent what's different about the centre, as you guys would find out. Like there's a lot of shows out there's a lot of exhibition shows, but actually coming to the centre, it's one of those, it's a very touchy-feely process. You can actually talk to the people you're going to deal with and actually ask the questions face to face, rather than just dealing with online, internet, and just sort of a faceless process like that, really, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are larger companies and stuff than Simon, and that's the reason why we ended up going with Simon really, is because ultimately you're dealing with the person who owns the company. They actually care about what they're doing. You're not just sort of another order to them really, and that's, you know, I'm not trying to sort of big them up or anything, but that's the reason why we sort of came here, and that's why we used them.
Because I think one of the things you were quite keen on was trying to wrap as much of the package up as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas traditionally with timber frame, it's been a case through the journey of obviously getting planning permission, getting detailed planning, getting your architect to do the building regs and everything, and then pass it across to the timber frame company to turn around, or the build system to turn around and build it. And then it's at that point they say, well, can't we move this? Can't we move that? If you'd have done this, if you'd have done that. And one of the key things Martin was trying to turn around and to sort of reduce the amount of overlaps in it. One of the things we did for you was actually completely cover that process off, didn't we?
Yeah, and that's, you know, for someone who hasn't done it before or doesn't really know the ins and outs of all the laws and everything, it's pretty good to have everything under one roof, so to speak. If one lot of people are dealing with it, then there's not going to be any sort of conflict in what's going on, and also it keeps the cost down as well.
there, because obviously as we started going through the drawings, there were certain things we had to do with layouts and things like that, but also it's time. Terminal actually speeds that process up, because we could then actually run the timber frame design parallel with doing the building reg submission. So as soon as we got building regs submitted, then we were approved on the timber frame drawings and up and running. And also it gave you cost certainty then as well, which again from a budget point of view is key to actually get that cost certainty. So after Martin had been at the show in the October, the order for the timber frame was placed in November, and groundwork started. And one of the key things Martin was also doing, yes, he was building to a sort of sensible program, but he left himself enough time in the program. You see, so many times you're seeing all these programs that say, yeah, we can build the house in that tighter period, but you don't allow any wiggle room if something goes wrong. And I said we pre-booked back in October, into November, when he placed the order for the timber frame. He said, I want to be on site end of March. I said, well, you'll be on site at the end of March as long as that base is ready, because I can't supply it on skyhooks. If the base isn't in, we won't be able to install it. He said, it will be ready. And so one of the things he did do, obviously starting the groundworks in March for the timber frame, starting the groundworks in January for the timber frame end of March, left himself quite a lot of time. But again, it was a massive learning curve, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we left sort of time in between when people were coming in, you know, sort of in week chunks really. So if anything did move or be delayed, you know, there's a bit of sort of wiggle room. You can bring people forward, you can move people back. Just, you know, not to mess people around and stuff, really.
But be realistic with that program. Like that's the one piece of advice I would say, as Martin said now, don't just push it all up together so tight, because otherwise it just will. That's where you create, to a certain extent, you will create your own stress.
And we were lucky with weather as well. It's pretty. I mean, compared to sort of where I'm from in South Wales, it's pretty dry up there in Oxfordshire.
Everywhere's dry compared to South Wales.
Yeah, I mean, we had sort of a week of rain. But in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing really. So yeah, we were quite lucky.
You had quite a lot of muck shift to take away from the site, did you?
Yeah. Probably spent about £7,000 clearing muck away.
Yeah, to
That's on
actually
top of the cost of taking the old bungalow away as well. That was another £7,000. So don't underestimate the cost of waste removal.
So obviously block work went in, started coming up out the ground. You can see you've got it kept it relatively clean and tidy. And then on the right hand side, then block and beam floors in, block works up, scaffolds up, ready for timber frame. So the timber frame arrived on the 28th of March, as he planned, as he programmed, and we managed not to delay it. After he'd done all that, had to make sure it was ready. But as you can see, there was not a lot of room on site. And again, one of the things these days, there's a lot of sort of small site developments, as we said now, on average, over 50% of our deliveries now go out on rigid lorries, because sites are literally garden plots, access is restricted. But people say, oh, how can you turn around and actually build with timber frame of an off-site construction? When you look at that 45-foot Arctic out there, where on earth are you going to put all that stuff? But we did, and when you look, obviously it's a slightly blurry picture there on the right now with the access with the van. Obviously there was very little space outside. But again, one of the key things Martin did do was think ahead and actually spoke to all the neighbours. At the end of the day, it's always a disruption for that first few days when the frame arrives and everything else. If you just seen a picture of that road and that verge come 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the day one of the delivery, there was timber frame everywhere.
So there have been two truckloads of stuff from your factory.
Yeah.
And that was on top of the other deliveries of stuff.
It was four lorry loads of deliveries in day one. They are coming in, but again, from a logistical point of view, timber frame came in 8 o'clock. By 10 o'clock, the floor came in. By 12 o'clock, we had steelwork delivered. And again, that's the thing with off-site, but also that's the thing, going back to what we were saying earlier about putting it into a package where we had complete control of it. We were organising the whole thing. We had control of that programme, so we weren't waiting for Martin to have organised this or organised that. We were dealing with the whole programme. So the end of day one, the ground floor panels were nearly stood. As you can see in front of the forklift, the steelwork's all there. Majority of our frames are erected with a telehandler. Gives us a lot more flexibility rather than cranes. Some sites you've got to use cranes, it depends on the design, but where some companies say they'll only use cranes, at the end of the day you can hire a telehandler for a week for the same cost as a crane for a day. And at the end of the day, with the weather we're having, and like Martin was saying, with the rains and the winds and that, at the end of the day, if you get winded off for a day, that's your cost gone out the window with the craneage. But again, from a package point of view, we control that whole package. You'll get some companies where they'll say, right, we'll supply the timber frame, we'll install the timber frame, but all the mechanical handling's down to yourself. Well, from a budget point of view, how do you control that? Whereas at the end of the day, if we're controlling that, if we're supplying it, we're going to control it, we're going to turn around and minimise that, or maximise that to its absolute.
And the thing is, well, if you've not done it before, and you phone a company up and say you want a crane or a digger or whatever, they'll charge you more because you don't know what you're talking about. So it does help.
On the right hand side, one of the big things in Martin's project was energy efficiency. Obviously with timber frame, you've got maximum energy efficiency. All the panels came in pre-insulated. So there was none of this insulating it on site. The panels were all insulated in the factory, all cut to precision, so they arrive on site. So it's one of those, you've got the right product in the right place, delivering and doing what it says on the tin. Because how many times at the moment when you buy a product, it's not doing what it says on the tin, and the sort of delivery within service. So we turn around, as you'll see shortly, the insulation went in the panel, and then there's another layer goes over the front of it. So ground floor went in. For those of you who've not seen them before, the metal web joists, they're not on them. 99% of our projects have got metal web joists. People say, well, how are they strong enough? You know, it's just a bit of timber top and bottom and metal V's in it. You can't believe how strong those joists are. But the benefit, we can run all the services through them, all the waste pipes through them, all your mechanical ventilation through them, so there's no drilling and notching, because it doesn't matter how many times you tell a plumber, don't notch there, that's the first place he notches. Don't cut there, that's the first place he cuts. So I wouldn't say they're idiot proof, but obviously it gives you a lot more flexibility. They're like that. And obviously on the outsides, those joists are what we call top hung as well. So it's the top chord of the joist going out onto the outside wall, so that we're reducing cold bridging back into the floor as well. Because at the end of the day, if you've got a very energy efficient wall on the ground floor and the first floor, you've got to make sure you've got it through the floor zone as well. Obviously the roof starts going in, and again, full control, roof beams go in. But we had a bit of a surprise the day the roof beams arrived, didn't we?
Yeah.
Roof beams come in, lorry arrives, 4 roof beams come off. I think, well done, mate. Those 4 roof beams are all the same length. There's supposed to be 2 at one length, 2 at another length. Oh, they most probably allowed them all to be extra long. No, they cut them all at the shortest length. So 2 of the beams fitted, and 2 of the beams were a metre short. And bearing in mind they were 10 metres long, that was a massive mistake for somebody. But again, because we were dealing with the whole thing, it was within our control to deal with. But the poor old lad on the saw at the factory that supplied the glue lamp had a bit of a kick in for cutting them a metre too short. So obviously we said earlier about flexibility. You saw that elevation on the front. One of the big things to get the space in there, look how we maximise that space. And during the design, with doing the building regs submission, playing with the design and the timber frame, we absolutely maximise the space completely through. So you can see upstairs footage, square meterage area was pretty much the same as downstairs. So there was no loss whatsoever. Whereas if we'd have turned around and took that double kink out of the roof to a sort of a monoplane, you'd have reduced that space massively. You'd have saved money in the build, but you'd have lost the space as well. So one of the things you'll see through it now, Martin gained maximum space through it.
And the reason we ran for that design as well is because we were stuck with, because we knocked down a bungalow, part of the covenants on the property was that it had to still be a bungalow. So we literally pushed what a bungalow is to the absolute limit pretty much.
Yeah, they are absolutely maximised. So you can see from a timber frames perspective how we can turn around and actually the rafters go in, the purlins, the trusses, and that's basically how we actually leave the build then, ready for the roofer to come in. Obviously for Martin, again, to try and reduce crossover trades, we did the fascias and soffits, not something we necessarily do on every project, but we tried to give Martin the complete one-stop shop, so then the roofer came in and away there was no sort of excuses. So you can see the roofer came in then and started felt and battening and started tiling it in. brickwork started. Brickwork started up the back. They're running the brickwork round, obviously, and getting himself underway. That was one of the trials and tribulations. Poor old bricklayers, they do not like timber frame. But it's sad. At the end of the day, we took the inside skin off them, and I think if they don't start working with it a little bit more, we'll have the outside skin off them as well. Because obviously, on average now, about 75% of the projects we do have got lightweight cladding on them, not using brickwork. Which, at the end of the day, one, it's a cost saving on the bricks. Obviously, bricks are hard to get hold of, but also it's a cost saving on the programme. And then also, because you're reducing your overall wall construction down, you can make your internal room sizes actually bigger.
It took the bricklayer more than twice as long just to do the outside skin of brick than it did for the whole of the frame to go up. So it's
and when you think he'd got no setting out to do nothing, he just got to follow a form or of a structure.
It was 9 days putting the timber frame up, and it took over 5 weeks to get the brick clad on.
So, and that's, you can see why, and that's just the cladding, not the structure. So, inside, obviously the insulation in the external walls, you've got to get the floor insulated as well. So his insulation all went down in the floor. He was really looking forward to his insulation experience, as we'll talk about as we go through. So the screed went down. Obviously his underfloor heating went in there, and then the screed got poured. And then there was more insulation, and more insulation. And he was like, where's all this insulation going, considering you've turned around and insulated the panels before they've come in? But everywhere had to be overlined with insulation as well as what went in the walls. But the U value on this build was down to 0.13. So at the end, like as you said now, you've been in the house, you moved into the house in August, and the house is maintaining its own heat without the heating even moving.
It's about 20 degrees all the time, and we still haven't put the insulation up in the ceilings yet, because we've only just run some of the internet and stuff up there. So yeah, it'll be even warmer then, I suspect.
So it's warm as toast, because you need the heat after coming from South Wales. So you can see the plasterboard started going in, and started to fill in. But again, look at the room in this. Like when you think on the right-hand side, that's the bedroom at the rear of the property. You can't believe in what is effectively a dormer bungalow, the actual space he's got inside it. There's the staircase. Their front entrance hall. And bit of a trial and tribulations with his electric Velux window.
Yeah, I ordered the wrong one. I got the width and the height the wrong way around.
But again, this is where having it under one sort of remit, the original architect drew it all up. I said to Martin, that window's never going to fit. Yes, it'll fit, yes, it'll fit. I said, it won't fit. Don't order that window until we've run the timber frame design. Because at the end of the day, that window depth was set. Looks there like you've got loads of room for the window, but that window was set by the flat ceiling coming in and the ridge of the porch down below.
The old one was higher, and now it was wider in the end.
So it's opened it up really nice. So then out the back, brickwork's up, they're scaffold down, and you started to turn around and landscape the back there, and the hot tub. Then you can see Sarah's idea. Hot tub had to go in before the timber frame was erected because they weren't going to turn around and get the hot tub in there afterwards.
Luckily it works.
So inside upstairs you can see that's the external wall. So you can see how we've actually pushed everything right out, and because we've got such a steep pitch before we cranked the roof, you weren't losing any space right against the outside wall. So again there, as we started getting ready to move in now, nice radiator on the wall, and obviously clearing through. There's the back, and his gym and man cave out in the back garden, and as I said, the little old hot tub.
And the bees.
And the bees. They're the bees up behind the hot tub. Then inside, as it starts to come to fruition, again, you can see with the ensuite there, look at the headroom. we're not losing headroom out of that place at all. We've absolutely pushed it to the maximum, because the guy that's doing the building regs and doing the design for the timber frame actually understands how the structure works, because he's following an engineer's report, so he knows what he's pushing in there, rather than factoring safety factors in. And then Martin wanted himself a cinema room, so everyone says, "What's the blue room?" Then the kitchen went in. A little over budget. What was it you were advised not to spend on?
Well, when I was sat down there last year, the one of the good pieces of advice was spend money on stuff that stays there. So your windows, your doors, your staircases. Don't spend loads of money on your kitchens and bathrooms, because you can change them. But yeah, we spent probably on the bathrooms and the tiling and the kitchen and everything, probably about 60 grand. That's nice.
But it looks fab. And at the end of the day, it's not necessarily your forever home, but you've built it to stay there like that. So, just going through some numbers. This was never a house to turn around and build to make a lot of money out of. This was a house to build because for 650,000 they were never going to be able to afford to go and buy that and actually fund that as a one-off, whereas to actually build it, do it like they've done it, they were able to turn around and get up to that. So buying that lovely little bungalow that somebody had all sort of done up and Martin knocked down at 357,500. Then obviously 300,000 build costs, with a valuation at the moment of 650, obviously is just about breaking even.
It's not too bad, because we still got the stamp duty and the VAT return to come back as well. It'll work out, we'll probably be in credit by about 20 grand.
Yeah, but as you said also, you think that if the value at the moment had dropped slightly, it was literally valued down in the last month.
Yeah. Since we moved in.
So I think, to be fair, once it's had time to mature as well, like that, it'll gain in value. But again, it was built to get what he wanted, the layout he wanted, the rooms he wanted, and the build he wanted. So it's always one of those great questions. What was the highs and lows of the projects, and what wouldn't you do again?
Learn how to drive a digger, that was quite cool. But then it got quite tedious at the end. Lows are probably dealing with the emotions of bricklayers. They're quite fragile little souls.
Especially when they take 5 weeks to brick run the timber frame.
Yeah, you have to be quite firm with them. Don't take any nonsense. At the end of the day, they're working for you. Don't let them dictate what they're doing. You're paying them. So if you want it done by a certain day, make sure it is.
Would you do it again?
Yeah.
I'm glad he said that.
I don't know why.
What would you do differently if you did it? What would you do differently if you did it again? What would you do differently when you do it again? When you buy that bungalow, as I keep ragging you next door that the old lady's going to sell and move out, but you're going to, she's gone.
Yeah.
Well, there you are. There's the project right on your doorstep. What would you do differently next time?
I wouldn't spend 15 grand building the outbuilding. I wouldn't spend loads of money doing the garden up as nice as it is. And there's just loads of expensive stuff that we've gone above and beyond on, really. You know, if it was to sell on, you know, we put triple glazed timber frame windows and stuff in the house, and ultimately, you know, if someone comes around to buy it, they're not looking at what type of windows and everything we've got. You know, we could have saved a lot of money on that as well and maximised the amount of cash, but it's for us to live in, so it's not really important, to be honest.
It's at the end of the day, it's your house. It's a family home like that. So they're to be fair, but it's one of those stories you always ask somebody. One thing that they say on the different TV programs: you built the house, would you do it again? Never. But he's managed to turn around and build the house, come out the other side, pre-planned the move. Again, talk about programming. Pre-planned the moving-in date. When we were on site putting the timber frame up, he told me then he would be moving in August bank holiday. I was just like, yeah, Mark, yeah, I know that. And when did you move in?
August bank holiday.
August bank holiday. So, but he was realistic. Again, realistic with the program, but firm. And as I said, yeah, and I think, to be honest, the bricklayer was about the one that you had to harden on the most, really. Otherwise, everybody else was pretty good.
I did offer him to leave the site, Unfortunately, he didn't want to, and then he carried on working.
So that's the sort of journey for Martin there, and as he said, he would do it again, or he will do it again. There, as I said, when he buys that bungalow next door. There, so it just goes to show you can do it and come out the other side. But there are a lot of lessons to learn, and I think the one thing is taking those lessons and taking those advice from somebody that's actually done it. But obviously from Frame Technologies' point of view, it's something where this is how the journey's changed for self-builders over the years. 10 years ago, we were turning around and actually supplying timber frame to a market where it was purely the architects were controlling all the design, all the front end, building regs, calculations, everything else. That's why it's almost packaged up more now, and at the end of the day, try and get rid of that overlap and get the timber frame to turn around and control as much of it as you possibly can, which, as you'll find quite a lot of them in the centre here now do. It actually gives you a lot more comfort, but also one of the key things I would say again to take away from me today, and Martin would agree with this. You go out to the market, you decide the build system you want. Okay, there, whether it be ICF, whether it be timber frame, whether it be thin joint, hopefully it'll be timber frame, hopefully it'll be ours, but make sure you're looking at apples for apples. It's so easy these days to turn around and have the drawings all done, it's all electronic, you put 20 names into the send field and press send, and you get 20 different responses back and you just cannot decipher one from the other. The times people come back to me and say, I've got this quote, your quote's too expensive, or your quote says this, their quote says that. And even I struggle, as somebody in the industry, to turn around and read quotations and read specifications, struggle to actually balance apples for apples.
And we had some quotes coming back and they were asking us to supply steel frames, plant hire, accommodation for the guys to come down and stay. And it just gets a bit too much on top of what the quote and everything is then. So it is important to look through and see exactly what it is they're giving you, because they can vary a lot.
They can go. So many times we're very critical in the way of cost, and we just take quote 20 pages and we're not looking for it, we're looking to the back page, how much it costs, rather than what's actually in it. And at the end of the day, we were talking earlier that our company this year has rescued, and I say rescued, 3 different projects from other companies where the client has not had what they thought they had. And that's one thing I would say to take away from today, is just make sure that you get what you're asking for, because it is, like Martin says, some will include accommodation, some won't, some will include mechanical, some won't. It's a hard enough job as it is. You don't want to be thinking, well, right, when will they want this? How do I do that? When do they want that? And how do you control the cost of it? You can't. So we will control that cost. We will try and take the stress out of that journey, where we will turn around and pick it up right at the carpet stage, greenfield stage, sorry, not carpet stage, greenfield to carpet, where we will take it from building regs right through to handing you over that timber frame structure. They're with the building regs, with all the insulation, with all the energy, with all the steels, with all the mechanical handling, everything done. It's just too easy for people to think that cheapest price is never best value. Okay, any questions? Hopefully I've covered everything. I've made sure we've got enough time for some questions.
Why did you choose the brick facing and not something that simple?
It was in the deeds as well. We had to have a red faced brick to match the rest of the street.
Right, okay.
Because they're in a street scene quite often, until that sort of gets broken up as such like that. That's why they were restricted on ridge heights, because obviously the bungalows either side of them, they're like that. So, but it is amazing how many different claddings are out there now, and obviously with lead times on bricks and things like that. Like, we've just done a project recently. Timber frame was up 4 weeks ago. They had to go back to the planners to change the cladding because they couldn't get the bricks till the end of January. Yeah. And like, it's just crazy. They're like that, and especially with there are so many different claddings on the market now, whether it be render claddings, you don't just need to traditionally look at brickwork all the time. They're like that.
We had the bricks delivered right at the end of when you were there, didn't we?
Yeah. Simon, can you turn around and take all these bricks in?
Yeah.
You've got a forklift, it won't take you long. I seem
They-
to remember the conversation.
The truck arrived with no sort of crane or anything on it.
Yeah.
It was like, what, 14 parts of brick?
I want it to look very traditional. I want to do this, I want to do that. Timber frame these days, we can build absolutely anything. If it can be drawn, it can be built. They're like that now, as open plan as you want it, as energy efficient as you want it, as big as you want it, as small as you want it. We can build it on restrictive sites, we can build it on poor access. I don't know, some of you read the programme for here today, and they got slightly confused in the heading for our presentation today with the Henhouse project. And they'd actually got mixed up with another project we were doing up in Sheffield, unfortunately. And that project, they said timber frame wasn't it for the project. Why? There's no room on site, access is very poor, it's very restrictive. Okay, the groundworks took 14 weeks on site. Timber frame took 8 days. Client was absolutely raving with the ground worker because they just hadn't thought about how they were doing it, hadn't sort of gone that bit further thinking the thing through. But again, what would they do differently? They'd have put more into the package of the timber frame. But again, if we know at the design, at the conception stage, that access is poor, we make the panel smaller. If we know that access is poor, we can design to make the steels and beams shorter. They're like that, so it's like anything else. We can build anything, anytime, any place, anywhere with it. So.